everybody, welcome to the first episode of From the Church Basement. My name is Joy, I'm a recovering alcoholic.
My name is Matt, I'm a recovering alcoholic and addict.
You might ask yourself why we decided to do this. Because we can. So, to start out, the first thing we want to do is thank everyone for being here. Thank you for supporting us along our way. Thank you for, helping us live the dream. Today, I think the biggest thing that we should address as our number one topic and very first topic, fear.
Fear is a great topic. In my work in recovery, it came up literally as my number one driving force in my entire life. Something I'm interested in and something I had to pick apart was I knew I had a problem for a long time, but it was actually fear of getting sober. And I'd like to know from you, Joy, was there a fear that prevented you from jumping into sobriety at first? My fear was fear of accountability. I was terrified that I was going to, for once, have to show up, be accountable, face myself, and I was literally terrified and having fear of fear. How about you?
I think the biggest thing I was afraid of when I was drinking actively was facing myself. I've never been afraid or fearful of much other than truly being me. Because I saw life as a popularity contest, I didn't realize it should have been about me versus me. Being a better version of myself. But then again, back in the days when I was drinking, and I was very young when I came into recovery. I was 23 years old. Asking me to go against the norm, and not knowing who I was because I never allowed myself out of the fear of it. Going back to the me versus me thing, I really had to start working on who I was, first of all, to really have the chance to make it about me versus me. I didn't know the person in the mirror. I didn't. I just knew that she abided to what society wanted. Someone drew a chalk line, I didn't cross it. Well, today, I'll step over that chalk line if it means getting to peace on the other side. Recovery is how I did it. Getting to know myself, being brave. A lot of people look at things and they say, I want to be strong. Like Matt, because he prays, meditates, and he lifts heavy shit. Not that kind of strong. I'm talking about people always say, I want to be strong. And that was me for many, many years. And I finally had to come to the conclusion that I didn't want to be strong. I wanted to be brave. And that's what this is about. That's what we're doing here. We're being brave because the fear no longer confines us.
Fear has confined me for most of my life. Coming into recovery, doing the work. The importance of doing the work is what does not take away the fear. It doesn't make you stronger. It makes you braver. You start going and moving through the fear in life, which is something that's new to me. It's new this last shot into recovery, kind of pulling it together for the first time. I'm kind of comfortable being my authentic self for the first time ever. I always felt like an alien amongst humans, which you hear a lot of people say in recovery, but it was true. I played sports, I was parts of groups of people, and I socialized, and I looked and appeared like I was functioning normal, but I always felt different, weird. I always knew I had that cracked lens and perception in life, and it wasn't until I got in recovery that I met all the other aliens, like Joy. And I started gaining strength through them, hearing their stories, and that strength and bravery that built up inside of me because of those people sharing vulnerably, openly, and being brave. I could become brave and started moving through my fear because I'm a very fear-driven person. It's a huge character defect of mine. I fight with it almost daily, but I persist. I keep moving forward.
Picked up that bravery.
I did. That was the most beautiful share I've ever heard. So much so, I believe afterwards I had to text you and tell you how important and life-changing that was for me, and it really has been. It's been a game changer, and that's the beautiful thing about recovery is people working together. I would not be here doing this. I would have been too scared to do this. I wouldn't have had the balls, but luckily, Joy shared her balls with me.
Yeah. And yes, this is how some of the conversations go. So, on top of it, like Matt was touching on, feeling like an alien. One thing that people don't realize is one of the symptoms of this disease is chronic uniqueness. I mean, seriously, I thought I was the only person feeling the way I feel. I remember being 23 years old, walking into rehab for the very first time, knowing I was broken, thinking I hit rock bottom at that point in time. And no one could have ever possibly understood me because, well, I was the almighty me going through my shit alone, not telling anyone how I felt, too afraid because, if I would have been honest, well, they probably wouldn't have liked me. So I hid some of the things about me because of the chronic uniqueness, and at that time, I didn't recover well. Matter of fact, like I said, 23 years old. I sit here today a little bit older than that, just a little. But it took me many years, and I would get years under my belt. Like the last try was 7 years, 5 months, and 18 days, and I let it all go because I never let it all go to another human being. I never told them completely how I felt, and I stayed stuck. And then that is when I hit rock bottom. I hit rock bottom when I threw away the time, the effort, and everything I had. And it took me years to get to where I am today after that. But I never gave up because I was tired. And I didn't want to live afraid of myself anymore. So I got to know me. And I got to know other people because of that. And I realized I wasn't chronically unique. But the first step of that, the first thing I had to do was put down the drink. I had to stop drinking. I had to allow myself to suffer from the disease of alcoholism. And until I did that, I couldn't realize that the problem was truly me. I didn't realize I was afraid of myself. I didn't know that the reflection in the mirror scared me more than anything else. And that was because, like I said earlier, I couldn't be true to myself. I didn't know who I was anymore. And I had to start at ground zero. I had to go back to the 12-year-old little girl who first met alcohol. And I had to revisit her, and I had to grab her by the hand, and I had to grow up all over again. Just me and her. And after I did that, things got better, and I got less scared because there was one person that I knew I could count on, and she was by my side every day, and that was me.
Beautifully put. That's in recovery. I have found that out of fear, I lived all my life shrinking, like the ever shrinking man. Like, I did not want people to see who I truly was because I have a character defect of defectiveness that I've had to work on in recovery. And part of my recovery story is therapy, is getting outside help, getting all sorts of help. Whatever tools are at my disposal, I now use. I used to not use them out of fear of being judged for using the tools that are put out there for us. It seems crazy, but I realized I was the ever-shrinking man, always hiding, never being authentic. And it wasn't until maybe about a year into recovery. I mean, it was a rough year till I really started doing the work. And it was only because of the pain of situations, divorce, all that good stuff in my life forced me to do it. Fear held me back, and I had to get so uncomfortable in recovery that I became comfortable doing recovery.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I
And
totally.
that that vulnerability that I refused to show up with finally had to be exposed. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't live in that fear anymore and hide in the hole. I couldn't numb it with drugs. I couldn't numb it with alcohol. I had to suffer from my disease long enough and bad enough until I was pushed into doing the work that helps me be brave and move through my fear.
So it made me think about this a little bit, Matt. Um, I used to be very comfortable being in the shadow of the big fish. So they say, some people enjoy life being a big fish in a small pond, right? I didn't want to be the big fish. I just wanted to be in the big fish's shadow. I didn't want all eyes on me. Oh my God, never. I couldn't handle that. So, I was very comfortable in the shadow. And because that's where my comfort zone was, I began to stuff my dreams. I abandoned what I wanted, to stay in the shadow, to be unseen, even though that ate at me. It ate at me inside, and I sacrificed so much time. I developed so many resentments for myself, dwelling in the shadows of others, until, like I said, I was just too tired. And if you suffer from this disease, or, similar diseases, anxiety, depression, pretty sure you guys feel the same way. But I got tired of just being tired. I wanted the things I wanted, and I don't mean the drink. I wanted to live my dreams, and I'm not saying I live them today, not fully, um, but I'm pretty damn close. I'm pretty close, because I put down that alcohol, and I suffered from the disease of addiction, the disease of self. Um, I began to come out of the shadow, right? May not ever make it out of a little pond, because I'm a small town girl. I may not make it out of the small pond, but I'm going to make the best of it. And I'm not going to sit in someone's shadow anymore. I'm going to chase my dreams, because, you know what, if I don't, others will. And it's a lot more fun chasing them than it is watching others get to do it.
That's so true. That I lived most of my life shrinking and codependently attaching myself to things that were unhealthy for me, just to kind of almost bask in the light without being in the light. Uh, it was a way of me sort of, dipping my toe into being human, without actually vulnerably being me. Uh, but again, it was fear that was holding me back, and you're right. I self-abandoned that entire time, to the point where when I would look in the mirror in active addiction, I was so numb, I didn't really feel it, but I knew I didn't like who I was. Didn't even know who I was. Not one bit. I would have told you who I was, and it would have been completely different from what I was actually showing up with in life. And it wasn't until I did some work and became accountable that I started to, process that and realize how far from who I thought I was and who I actually was showing up as was. And that gap was all fear, all shrinking myself in fear and not being authentic. Once I started opening up and having real conversations with people and being a little more authentic, I started to not shed the fear. I started to move through the fear better. And I started to prioritize myself a little bit, and also in that process prioritize helping others, which used to seem to me like two different things, but by helping other people I've been started helping myself, and it's been an amazing process. But through all of that, I've moved through kind of the fear in life and started prioritizing my dreams, my desires, and You know, I'm not going to be a millionaire or live on a yacht or anything like that. But spiritually, I feel clean. I feel amazing. I'm living a life beyond my wildest dreams. It wasn't what I thought it would be. Recovery taught me that all the things I thought were important really don't mean that much at all. What really means the most to me is living a life where I am comfortable being me and bringing that to the world and using that to help other people.
And by work, I want to elaborate on some stuff because sometimes in therapy, or, therapy, yeah, therapy, recovery, you sit and you hear people say, I did the work. What work? What work? I had to go back. I had to look at my life, look at my resentments, look at the people I hurt. I had to look at the role I played in that. I had to give some acceptance and accountability to my role in it. I lived like a victim because you know what? It was easier to be a victim than it was to stand up and say, hey, wait, my role in this, I was wrong, right? And so that fear, that made me a victim and kept me a victim. The fear of ownership, too, even, of some of the just stupid shit I did. And I cuss, I'm sorry, people. But yeah, some of the stupid stuff I did, I had to hold myself accountable for and stop looking and blaming others for it. And once I did that and I could acknowledge that and I could admit it to someone else, and I don't just mean, and that's the other thing too, when we talk about the work we did and the people we did it with, we did this work with another person in recovery. Therapists, those kind of things. I didn't just dump my shit on some rando person who, I was going to harm with my trauma because, you know what, some of the shit I've done in my life, some of the places I put myself or I tolerated, that's going to put some people in a fetal position in a corner. And it's weird because us, aliens, I guess that Matt called them, us people in recovery, us alcoholics, us addicts, we normalize a lot of trauma. There isn't too much that makes us go, you did what? Because you know what? We've all done something. So that helped alleviate some of the fear of shedding, of making the work easier. And then you get liberated, right? You get liberated. You get liberated from your past. And like I said earlier, that's when you get to go back and you get to visit that person, that child you were, and you get to live out your dreams. Every day isn't a dream, though. In early recovery, I know that if I could give someone one word of advice, it would be, it gets worse. It really does. Because without the bad days, without it being worse, it can never get better. It really can't. When you're going through it and you're lost and that self isn't within you, it's scary. It really is. It's scary. And, I was just fortunate to know where to go. The church basement. And I met people that were just like me, and they helped me do that work we're talking about. And because of that, I was able to grow. I just never gave up my identity crisis, part of the identity crisis of active drinking. I never could seem to identify as someone who was never going to drink again. I don't know about you. I think that terrified me. You want to move past fear and talk about being terrified. I was terrified to identify as someone who would never drink again. I was okay with identifying as an alcoholic because I knew I was. That was not That was not something I had a problem doing, but I was terrified to identify as someone who would never drink again. And that is what kept me stuck. That is what would get me 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years sober. And I'd fall off the wagon for one night, a month, whatever. And then I'd come running back because I would start to instantly feel that loss of self. And that was a whole different fear. When you recover and you begin to fall back into the active drinking, into the alcoholic that you used to be, that creates a whole new fear. So far in his recovery, Matt's been perfect. Matt has made his days consistent. I have not. I started this journey in 1995, and, well, I haven't always been a saint. I've had interruptions in my sobriety, but like I just said, it was because I didn't practice the acceptance. I had the identity crisis yet. I was an alcoholic, but I could not identify, like I said, as someone who was never going to drink again. And once I did that, once I found myself, I loved her so much that I knew. I didn't just identify as. I knew I was never going to drink again.
That's beautiful. That last bit is freaking beautiful. And I identify with that. And I want to jump back a little bit here. I was so afraid of admitting I was an alcoholic because my father was an alcoholic. So I'm like, I don't want to be the guy who says, hi, I'm Matt, I'm an alcoholic. I so desperately wanted to avoid that, so desperately was afraid of admitting that, even though I knew early. I knew the way alcohol lit me up when I was like 14, 15 was different. And I knew from my dad's experience that it was alcoholism. But I lied to myself and to everyone else for so long. I went down such a rabbit hole trying to appear like I'm drinking normal that I started using opiates because I would get wrecked with only looking like I drank 3 or 4 beers, and people saw me drink 3 or 4 beers and it looked like I was all good. Oh, he's got it together. Really, I was getting wildly addicted to anything and every other drug you can imagine, just trying to admit that I wasn't an alcoholic. I burned my life to the ground because I was too afraid to admit I was an alcoholic. And, that's my journey. That's the process I took, I guess, to get to where I am. And I often say I regret the things I did in active addiction, but I don't regret the journey it took me on to get me here. Who would have ever thought I'd be here doing this with joy? The people I have met in that church basement, the people I got to open up to and share all the ugly parts of myself. Not everyone, but specific people I've gotten to really share that with and get a hug and have them share back something equally as disturbing from our past. And that's something I was terrified of sharing with people, or letting them see who I am. Letting my light shine. And through recovery, I started to get more comfortable with that because other people who were like me were comfortable with that. And I was literally just following along until my light started to kind of shine and I fell in love with myself.
And I gotta stop you because that was something, and this is what we do. We sit here, we talk about this stuff because, I don't know, it's the Weird Boys and Girls Club. But you said about you hugged people, right? That was something I never would have done before. I was mean. I didn't want you to hug me, don't touch me, my God, let you in, to let you, and show you I care. I think it's funny because we do come from, like I said, we're based out of a program, might possibly, allegedly have an A in it. But, it was the fellowship of that certain program that aided in my recovery this time, the allowing people in to know me. And it goes back to fear, because I was afraid you'd know who I was. And, it just, it's amazing. A hug. Just a hug, the word hug, how I can just simply look back and go, wow, I remember when I didn't want anyone to hug me, right? I was not huggable. And now, I'll hug you, oh, I'll hug you. I ain't afraid to give one out, even. Take one and give it out. Um, and that's the beauty of recovery. That's the beauty of just learning who you are and learning to love others, too. I say take the hug, but give it out, too. So, one thing is, this program taught me so much about me and how much people care about me, right? And uh, help me boost who I've become. But who I became was someone who didn't judge another person also. Oh my goodness, because I would have been looking, my former self, I would have been looking to judge you. I would have been looking to laugh at you, like I said. I would have been looking to not hug you. I would have been looking to let everybody know exactly what I wanted them to know about you. You know, and today, that's not it. I've gotten an acceptance of folks for what they are. Now, I'm not saying I won't look at people and tell y'all that you need some groundwork, because I will. But that doesn't mean that I judge you for it. You know, I'd like to think that I became a safe place, not only for myself, but for others, just simply because of my own recovery. And because of that, that's why we're going to keep coming back each week, and we're going to keep doing this. Like we said in the beginning, this was not perfect. We know that, right?
Mm.
But we'll get better as time goes by.
Definitely.
Because that is what recovery is about. Growing, getting better, each and every time, every single day.
Every single day is a gift. Every single day is not guaranteed. So take today, do the most of it, and we'll keep coming back and keep getting better.
See you next week.